We were, oh yeah. First, recently in the library assembly room, we moved over here. Jack Daniel bought this and gave it to the library. And then we did it, put in the projection. There's also projection in the assembly. And I teach my history class there, because it's more defined. But our programming we usually do here. So the Museum of Substitution is in there Saturday, showing some of the new positions that they had for the museum. They still need about $2 million. They'll be able to put out. Well, we've had a lot of rich people leave money. That's how we got the building built in the first place.
One time I came to jobs there.
Yeah.
A long time ago. That's probably 2 decades ago. July. We're almost there.
And we have 6:57. That clock must be fast.
It's a subject I sort of know.
Sorry. Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Ashley. I'm the president of the Redlands Area Historical Society. And we have a plan of having the 1938 flood come through this wall and go right through the back 6 or 7 rows of the contemporary clubhouse so that you'll feel like you're really in it. Okay? So how many of you were alive in the 1938 flood? A few hands going up. Okay. You were too little to remember anything. Okay. Just to give you a couple of footnotes of what Historical Society has been up to lately. We have new members of the board, and John Beal pointed out that our bylaws hadn't been looked at since 2006. and that cost me 4 hours. John Beal and Jennifer Schneider and then myself went through the bylaws, and we are now sending a revised copy to each of the board members to look at. And then at the next meeting, we're going to have it on the wall here, actually on the screen, and you can look through it, because we have to, according to our bylaws, give you 5 weeks to cogitate it. And then in June, during the ice cream social, when you're all really, really anxious to eat ice cream, we'll bore you to death by having you vote on the bylaws that we have now modified in 2023. And hopefully I won't be around for the next bylaw revision because I don't want to participate in it. We also had some practice tours of the downtown. Judith Hunt, who's going to come up here right now and tell you about what she's done. We had 2 tours this past weekend, and one of those was during the Saturday morning market. And that was a big mistake because they had to compete with the microphone and the music that was going on down on East State Street. When they got away from East State Street, all was well and they were able to do. But they did one tour on Friday, and then Friday morning at 9 o'clock, and one tour at 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. Now they're going to do another tour this coming weekend, one on Friday, 9 o'clock, starting at Ed Hales Park. And that's for volunteers who want to learn how to do the tours. If you give her your email address and your telephone number, Judith will send you the tour. You can read it. You don't have to memorize it. But if you read it like a dozen times, you'll be pretty good, okay? And that's all that we were looking at, because you're not trying to read the whole thing to the people as you're giving the tour. You'll bore the hell out of them. What you want to do is hit the highlights of the main things, talking about the buildings and the things that have happened downtown. Since the market morning on Saturday is in the morning, then the second tour on Saturday will begin at 1 o'clock at Ed Hales Park and do the second half of the tour that they didn't do this past weekend, okay? So Judith, anything else you want to add?
Hi, everybody. So we had 7 people show up. I have 23 people on my email list. So I need the rest of you please to show up, because our plan is that on May 20th, with the Historic Preservation Fortnight, we're going to give tours. This is one of the activities which the Redlands Area Historical Society has agreed to do in participation with the Conservancy. So we will probably be giving those tours May 20th, which is a Saturday, and we're also going to do them in the afternoon due to the downtown Saturday market. And that's going to be our kickoff. And then going forward, we want to give at least 1 tour, depending on how many people would like to take the tour, every single weekend. So that's why we need to train you and we need to get you going and up to speed by May the 20th. So you still have lots of time. We're going to do a lot more practices. You don't have to come to all the practices. You just have to come and get a little bit of information from me. I'll answer all your questions. I'll tell you how to go about memorizing the tour. And this tour has been diligently written by Tom Ashley and Ron Running, and it's been condensed, and it's really quite lovely. We did the first part both Friday morning and Saturday morning, and everybody really enjoyed it. It's a 45-minute tour, and the first one we did on Friday morning took us an hour and a half, because we had some folks on the tour that knew a lot about history, so it was really fun. So we really need you to come and help us. This is a fundraiser for the Historical Society. Once we're up and running, starting on the fortnight, May 20th, we will be collecting a fee. But all the trainings, of course, are free to you. And I can answer all of your questions about how to do it and what you should say. And it's really going to be pretty stress-free. We're going to send 2 people out together. So we're not going to send you into the abyss by yourself. So you're going to have a partner to help you. And they should be trained as well so that they can help answer some of the questions that might come up. And Ron and I are going to really be your support staff. So we're going to come and cheer you on and make sure you've got everything you need. And I think it's going to be a really great thing. Years and years ago, there were ongoing walking tours in downtown, and they've kind of gone by the wayside, and we're trying to resurrect that. And it could be a terrific thing for anybody in town, or if you bring a guest to town, or Esri's having a conference, or the university's having a conference, or a homecoming, or it would be a lovely thing to send your folks on down and have a nice walking tour. So thank you very much.
And we have a new chair of the Old House Committee. And the Old House group is planning something special coming up. So Kathleen Beal, would you like to talk about what you have in plans? Notice I'm standing.
This is pretty exciting.
Not for long though.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kathleen Beal, and we wanted to wrap up our year with something kind of fun and exciting. And so come April, the April meeting for our regular meeting is going to be the Marvelous Mrs. Miggs, and it'll be presented by John, my son. And so that's the regular meeting, open to everybody, open to the public. That's on Monday, April 24th. The following Saturday, at 1:30 in the afternoon on Saturday, April 29th, Old House Group will be having a garden party to wrap up our year. And that will be at the home of the person who was the marvelous Mrs. Miggs. And one of the reasons Mrs. Miggs was so marvelous is she had an incredible garden. And so the homeowners are also members of the Historical Society and have graciously allowed us to host this outdoor event. It will be from 1:30 to 3. However, it is going to be by a strict RSVP only, and they have capped the number of attendees. It's going to be capped at 60. Now, in the past, when we've had RSVPs to some of our events, we've had more people RSVP than have attended. So we are asking, if there's the slightest chance that you might not be able to come, please just RSVP if you're really certain that you'll be able to come. We are going to have entertainment that afternoon at the party with also one of our former board members and one of our members, Sue McClure, will be performing that afternoon, and we'll have refreshments. We are asking for costumes optional from the time period 1890 to 1930, I think we decided. So it should be a fun event. And when that announcement comes out, be sure, if you are certain you can come, be sure to RSVP quickly. Okay, thank you.
Most of you will be able to wear exactly what you have on now. Oh, there I go. So, okay, those are the 2 big announcements I want to give. And the Vice President and Program Chair for this past year, actually 2 years, has been Ron Running, and he gets to introduce our speaker, because last month I gave him a month off. I introduced myself because I did the program. So Ron, it's all yours.
John Paul, if you
Hello, everyone. Quickly, not to stand between you and the main event tonight, but if you don't know me, I'm John Beal. I'm the Ways and Means Chair on the board of the Historical Society, and yes, you'll be hearing from me in a month when I deliver a lecture on Mrs. Miggs. But in the meantime, I wanted to point out something new in the background. Some of you are new members, some of you may just be members of the public, and I wondered if y'all knew that the Historical Society does, these lectures free and open to the public. And that's by design. We want to share Redlands history with everybody. It belongs to everyone here in this community. We also do a lot of great philanthropic work, which maybe you aren't so aware of. We have in the past given large amounts of grants for historic preservation, including for cut stone curb, technically split stone curb, and ashlar wall restoration. And so in the back, if at the end of the talk you feel that you've learned something today, if you would be willing to contribute a free will donation of $5, all of which our store minder is waving the box in the background. If you might consider making a gift of $5 as a free will donation, all funds raised in that box will go to our Historic Preservation Fund, which will help us continue this program. Thank you.
All right. So we're glad to see that everybody's made it dry tonight, waiting for the next rainstorm tomorrow. And who knew that when we scheduled this event that it would be so historic of a rain year for us. Susie comes from she was the retired archivist at the Institute at Cal State San Bernardino, where she oversaw all the collection of the entire materials for the Santa Ana River watershed. So that goes from the mountains here all the way down to the coast. So we've been looking forward to hearing all about it. And so I'll turn the time over to Susie.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to get this out of the way really quick. Yes, that family. So I just married into the Suzie Earp family. So if you really want to know about Wyatt Earp and all that stuff, talk to Nick Caltato. He knows a lot more. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Water Resource Institute. We have the largest collection of historic water documents, materials, maps, movies, everything you can, aerial photos, everything you can possibly imagine at Cal State San Bernardino. It was a huge undertaking to begin that library. I retired about 5 months ago, and I was the longtime archivist and the director. You say it moves, but
Hit the space bar. Now I have the down bar.
I don't know. I don't want to hurt your. Well, technical difficulties. There we go. All right, I'm going to go real quickly about the first part of this because I'm just going to tell you a little bit about why in the world we have such a flooding issue occasionally. And one of the things is we live in this desert area, but we're all surrounded by these steep mountains. And the steep mountains make a huge difference. But they also allow us to live here because if we didn't have the water, we wouldn't be able to live here. But I've always loved this picture. But here we are, there's the San Bernardino Valley, and you can see we live right along the edge of those transverse ranges. We are very clever. Every one of those canyon drain down to the Santa Ana River. That is the major river in this watershed. The Santa Ana River is also the biggest river in Southern California. There's over 6 million people that live on the watershed, and it is from the Big Bear all the way down to the beach. Here's just a watershed map. So you can see it begins way up in Big Bear, goes all the way down to the ocean. And all the way along on that, there's a lot of things that happen. But up here in San Bernardino, where we are, you can see we're right on the edge of the foothills, and every one of those canyons drain. And some of the major rivers along that are along Creek, the Home Creek, Devil's Canyon, Waterman Canyon, Twin Creek, Harrison, Warm Creek, City Creek, Plunge Creek, Santa Ana River, and of course, Mill Creek. And we all live on this alluvial fan. So if I'm going to go backwards a little bit to this picture, so all these canyons are draining and they create this big, nice, big flat place where we all live. So, you know, when people were coming in to develop San Bernardino Valley, I mean, we're talking a long time ago now, 200 years, they saw this nice, pretty, you know, it wasn't mountains or anything else, a pretty flat area that we could all live in. So that's where they put that's where they put their town. And of course, it's built up and built up and built up over the years. But all of those canyons are draining. You can see some of the water that's come in the past there. Here's all the rivers. Like I say, Lila Creek, Cajon. Should do it this way. Cajon. It comes right through San Bernardino, and then all these rivers along here. All they want to do is get back to the Santa Ana River. That's their whole point, is to get back to the Santa Ana River. That's what they want to do. And water will just reestablish itself. You can put it in a channel, or you can put, you know, you can put some sides and stuff on it, but it's just going to want to go back to where its historic way is. And as you know, we have these big, beautiful mountains. I mean, we all love them, right? But they're pretty steep. And right now they're beautiful. You've all seen these pictures, I'm sure. Now, this wasn't the first time that we've had a flood. Of course, we've had a lot of floods. The major flood of the area of the time was in 1861-62. It was a huge flood, way beyond 1938 even. But you can see here's a picture from 1891. We had floods in 1825. Grandpap Lugo claimed that all of San Bernardino was a lake. This is written in a transcript. All of San Bernardino was a lake, and the rain came and pushed it all out to the ocean, which is not true, but it's a nice story. And then 1851, we had a flood. Like I said, the Great Flood was 1861-62. There's another Great Flood in 1867, 1884, 1889, 1909. And 1916. The population in San Bernardino in 1916 was about 15,000 people. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about what San Bernardino was like, because not too many of us were here from the 1930s. But this is Harris's right here. I'm sure some of you remember Harris's. This is downtown San Bernardino. It was a bustling place. The major economy was the railroads, of course. The average weekly pay for somebody in San Bernardino was $28.50 a month. I mean, I'm sorry, that's a weekly pay, $28.50. The population in San Bernardino was about $40,000. Railroads and citrus were the largest part of the economy. We had over 48,000 acres of citrus at a value of $275 million, 1938 money. So it was very, and when we think of citrus, it's not just the oranges, it's also the packing houses, the box makers, the ice houses, the railroads, all of those things go into that. So it's pretty important. But what else was, so the railroads, that was extremely important. When I was growing up, there was a lot of people that worked for the railroads. The citrus, of course, you guys are surrounded here in Redlands with citrus all around. You had a similar situation. C.T. Johnson was the San Bernardino mayor in 1938. Frank Merriman was the governor of California. But also what was happening was the Depression. And if any of you have lived through the Depression, I'm sure you've read the stories about the Depression, but people were just coming in. It was the, they were leaving other areas because they couldn't find work. They believed they could find work. Grapes of Wrath, the entire story of Grapes of Wrath. So here's some of the jobs that people, some images. Here's some people walking the rails and riding, jumping on the trains. And they were trying to decide. So we're getting a lot of pressure in 1938 to do some flood control work. And we either could spend it on flood control, or we could spend it on slowing the water down and filling up our aquifer. So it was either conservation, and you know, this is always what we have to do: conservation, flood control, conservation, flood control. So we had really gone in for conservation far more than flood control. And you can see this is where Seven Oaks Canyon is now. So this is the big mouth of the Santa Ana River. See all this diking? This was all to slow the water down to fill up that aquifer, because the farmers didn't have to pay as much money if the water was closer to the surface. So they really wanted that aquifer full. So that's where most of the taxes were going. But there was a lot of pressure from Orange County by 1938. In fact, they were planning to build a dam at Parado in from about 1935 on. And I have all the building plans in the archives about building that dam. It just, well, you'll see what happened. And then we had a terrible freeze in 1936 and 37, a month of lower than normal temperatures. And that just destroyed the crops that year. Bark was popping off trees, the smudge pots were on 24/7. It was a dark, dark time. And of course, when you can't ship citrus, then there's no economy. So everybody was pretty desperate for 1938 to work out a little bit better. Okay, so before the flood, we'd had about 9.5 inches of rain. So usually we have about 14 inches of rain a year, somewhere in there, 12 to 14. But the first storm came along and it was just backed up by a few hours by another storm. And those two storms together dumped over 12 inches of rain from February 27th to March 1st. There was over 36 inches in Lytle Creek alone. Only about 3 cabins survived it. It just started to rain and rain and rain. And as we know, it can rain a lot around here, right? Things are right. The Santa Ana River was a mile wide and it had the flow of the Mississippi River. So it was huge. And of course, we'd gotten kind of complacent about keeping it very clear. So you'll see a lot of fields, a lot of people were camping along the sides, all kinds of things that made it worse. You'll see these images in a minute, all kinds of snags in it. Every plant, every tree, every cabin from Lytle Creek came down. So all the vegetation came down onto San Bernardino and just got pretty much dropped off at Mill and E. You'll see pictures of that. But this is very typical. See those little houses stuck out in the middle? Somebody had camped there. They're waiting to do something with the citrus industry probably. And they got flooded out. But see, this is the kind of thing that we know better, but we get very complacent because when it's dry, we just think we can use the ground and we really can't because then we have a flood. This is City Creek. So where Norton Air Force Base used to be was San Bernardino Airport now. You can see there's some room, there's some early flood control works right there. That channel actually is still there, but you can see City Creek is really, really splashing down right there. And you can see this was a Conservation Corps cabin. And this picture was in here because a woman went back to pick up her baby in the middle of the night and she fell through the floor with the baby and got swept down the river. So there's 22 lives lost outright. 29 homes were swept away. 150 of them were destroyed. 900 people were left homeless. Over $80 billion in property lost. It was bad. There's a house floating down. This is right downtown San Bernardino. And you can see the rains. This is Sierra Way, and I have a great story about Sierra Way. Sierra Way was originally built as a drainage ditch. In fact, the early Mormons built it as a drainage ditch. even when I was a kid, the curbs were about two or 3 feet high. I mean, they were, you know, up to your knee, probably. They were very deep. Anyway, as time had gone on, and there's mostly dry weather, they had made a crown in the middle of the road so that the cars could go on it and get through this, because it drained often. I mean, even in a small rainstorm, it would drain. So they had also made these little drawbridges that were out in the parkway, and they'd come to the middle of the crown road and they could get to both sides. But if the water got really, really flowing, then they got pushed out of the way. So this is in the middle of the flood. And Bob Holcomb, some of you will remember him. He was the mayor of San Bernardino for 18 years. He was a 15-year-old kid in 1938. And he and a friend had built a canoe. And they were going to, the plan was that they were going to take that canoe from Santa Ana, you know, up at Seven Oaks, all the way down to the ocean. That was their big plan. Well, then this flood happened. And of course, now they have this channel of water. So they hop in the canoe and start going downtown. And about halfway downtown, the boy in the back says, "Oh, you know, this is getting a little scary. I can't swim." So they get all the way downtown to where Meadowbrook Park is, and it crashed into a telephone pole and broke it all to pieces. And those boys were clinging to this telephone pole. And some men walked out with a 2x4 and drug them back in. So Bob really remembered the flood. Let's just put it that way. But Sierra Way it's always been a drainage ditch. And then, you know, as the channels got built over the years, it's better. There's still pretty high curbs, but not anything like when I was a kid. There's a barn with a Warm Creek running through it. This is taken from Paris Hill out towards where my house is. So I grew up right by Paris Hill, and there's nothing there now. I mean, not in 1938, there was nothing. But that's a concrete channel now. The channels, by the way, well, I'll talk more about flood control, but that channel in particular got built in about 1963 or so, well after the war. This is at Little Mountain. So the creek along there runs way out from Devil Canyon all the way out around down Kindle, what would be Kindle, and then it floods at this area, and actually would keep going all the way down to Sierra Way. So Devil Canyon would drain down to Sierra Way. So it was a long way, but it made big flood. There's a big debris basin there now. There's a big restaurant on top of that hill and everything else, but back in those days, the Orange Show was about to start. Does anybody remember the old Orange Show? Oh, yeah. So the Orange Show was super proud of these they just made these gates, and they were really, really proud of them. And they had the Orange Show was about to start in like 2 weeks. So there was a bunch of men on the inside of that, and it started to rain, it started to flood, it started to cause some problems. So the men built a wall of sandbags all the way around this building, saved the building, and kept it from flooding. And a lot of people housed there when their houses got destroyed. Here's they used to make these designs out of oranges, if any of you remember that. But this is, okay, so this is Mill and Eat. There's that Orange Show building right there. And this has become, it was Colton Avenue back in the day, but it's Inland Center Drive now, back in those days. This is Otter Creek. Doesn't it look sweet? This is before the flood. There's the trees all the way around it and everything else. There's Urbita. Okay, so that's before the flood. This is after the flood. So everything at Lytle Creek came and just deposited its load. And that's what happens. A river will flow down, and then as it starts to get towards the edge of where it's going, it begins to lose its load a little bit. And a lot of the pictures you'll see in a minute are from that area. So there's the Orange Show, those brand new gates that they were so proud of. And a lot of people in this area, I interviewed, like 150 people about this. And they pulled, they used a rope and like a flat boat, like a barge. And they tied a rope at the gas station that was right across the street from the Orange Show and floated then over to this building. And they built a big bonfire out in the middle of the Orange Show building to keep everybody warm that night. And then they lived there for about, I don't know, about a week at least. But this is a depression. So people just dug their houses out as soon as they could. There wasn't any condemning them or any of that kind of stuff. They just dug them out. So this is the Gate City Auto Port. This is where Carl's Jr. is now. This is before the flood. And the Gate City was basically a motel, kind of a motel, but they also had a campground there. And a debris dam burst in Lytle Creek sometime about 2 o'clock in the morning and sent a huge flood of water and just went through here. And you'll see the after effects of that. Oh, it just destroyed. They lost many people in this location. And you can see, look at these big tree stumps. I mean, and this is where, so that gas station is where they tied off the ropes to get across the street to the Orange Show. It just went right through that motel. Can you imagine waking up to that? Oh gosh. This right here was my kids' favorite slide, because whoever gave this to me told me that there was a hand. And so they went over every inch looking for that. They never found it. They really wanted to. It did put a lot of people to temporary work. The WPA, of course, hired people to dig things out. This was condemned and destroyed. It was not livable after that point. But you can see all the destruction down in this area. And I interviewed people that lived right across the street from the Orange Show, and they just simply dug their houses out. So they were, they were full of mud up to the ceilings, a couple inches away from the ceiling. And they would just dig them. They hired little boys to go in their crawl space under their house and dig out for 50 cents the crawl spaces out. But the boys did it. So right about where the stadium at the Orange Show is, there was this lumber store. And I understand it was sort of used lumber and things like that. But as you can see, it just got really torn apart by the flood. It caused its own debris flow. And then this is where the Subaru dealership is, down on E Street. And you can see it went right through there. And the only thing they were able to save was their safe. But it popped open and they lost everything out of the safe. But all of their drills and everything else got destroyed. So this is Southern Pacific. In San Bernardino, I should have said this before, but I think you probably know. There's Santa Fe Railroad, but there's also the Southern Pacific Railroad, which is in Colton. And then there's the Union Pacific, which is the, like Amtrak is now, the passenger train. So there were a lot of trains in and out every day. But this is Southern Pacific right here, as you can see. And this is before the flood. And these little tracks, that's the Colton. I mean, that's the Lytle Creek coming along there, just a little tributary of Lytle Creek. So this is before, and this is after. This area was completely destroyed. South Colton was, it was a mess for a very long time. Most of the people that lived in South Colton were people that worked in the ice houses. They did migrant farm work. They did labor. They worked in packing houses. Often they were first generation Mexican American. Anyways, these people had a very long time before they could get up and going again. I think it was 6 months. They were still boiling water. Of course, the sewer plant and the water all got destroyed. And you can see the train station is a mess. Well, I mean, yeah, it's a mess. And this is that area. So this is all South Colton right here. And they dug these houses out and moved back into them. I mean, that's what I was told over and over again. Very few of them were actually condemned or anything else. They didn't know about things like black mold and all that kind of stuff. So they just moved back into them. This is the brand new fire station. It just opened like 6 months before the flood. And it got pretty much filled up with water almost immediately. I mean, like I say, Lytle Creek just brought everything down to get down to the Santa Ana River, and it just destroyed it. These people lived right across the street from the Orange Show. And this was the person that I was interviewing. This was their grandparents. And they remember some of the things that they had in their house that made it through the flood. But eventually they moved this house because it was where McDonald's used to be. So there's a Jack in the Box, and then there's, I don't think it's a McDonald's any longer, but it used to be a McDonald's right across the street from the Orange Show. Anyways, they moved that house up to 40th Street eventually. But you can see it's just flowing through here. Here's Lytle Creek, and it's not happy. And all the destruction and mayhem it caused. I also should say that the little electric trolley cars, so they had also a sort of like your Aero train, is that what's called here in Redlands, the Aero train? They had a little train like that. It was also just, the tracks were also destroyed on that. Look at these cuties though. It's just bad. There they are trying their stuff out. That's what they did. So the Santa Fe Railroad, the 200 cabins came down from Lytle Creek, and the B yard was flooded in the Santa Fe yards, of course, and 2.5 miles of railroad tracks were out in the Cajon Pass. And I talked to engineers 50 years after the fact, and they were still a little bit salty that they were pulled off their trains and had to go fix track. But the only way they could move the train was to fix the track, and they didn't have enough people to fix the track. So they were still a little bit miffed that they were pulled off their trains to fix. It just hadn't, I mean, there was no way you could clean up. There was no way in and out. There was over 700 miles of highways out. All the bridges were out. All of the electric lines, all the gas lines, those were all destroyed. The gas lines are underneath bridges, and they were all torn out. If the bridges were not outright destroyed, then the approaches were gone. So, hard to use. There's that house on City Creek again. And look at this. This is quite the view from that throne right there. Hope nobody was in there. It was a lot of work. Let's just put it that way. Here's that house. Oof. Now this is at San Antonio. So I think it's up in Upland. So it's north of Upland, right at the foot of the mouth of the San Antonio Creek. And it brought that cabin down and then smashed it into a big tree. There was no information in and out. So the only way you could get a message in was with Western Union. There was no driving in and out. So for instance, they brought in about 70 guys from LA to try to fix the gas lines. They had to go to every single house, turn off the gas line, fix the line, and then turn it back on. And they put them up in some railroad cars. But the only way that the people could get messages in and out was, the telephone lines didn't work. A lot of people didn't have telephones anyways, but was with the telegrams. I just wanted to bring this up again because this is such a startling picture. No citrus was shipped for over a month out of the Southern Pacific yards. The Pacific Electric lines at 3rd Street were buried, and poor Pacific Electric, it was just about, well, it was right on the edge of people getting their own cars. So it was sort of on its way out, and then they had to invest a lot of money in getting railroad lines out. You'll see that in a minute. There's the Roundhouse, Santa Fe yards. That's pretty bad, right? I mean, you can't go anywhere on a train when it's buried this deep. These must have been quite the startling photos because a lot of people took pictures of this. And you can see them walking along on hanging track over here. It just doesn't seem very safe. I don't know. No, I don't. That's the signal master's house. It fell in the middle of the night sometime. And then this is a hanging track again. And the teenagers that I interviewed, they would often dare each other to climb up and down the hanging track, as teenagers do. And there's a great story. Oh my gosh, the superintendent of schools for San Bernardino, Herb Fisher, when he was a teenager, he lived in Rialto. And they came over to San Bernardino High School to go to high school, but they drove back and forth. So he and his friend and this one girl that they brought with them every day, the rain started, all the flood things happened, they canceled school, but they couldn't go home because there was just no way to get across the road. In fact, they went to drive across and they saw a car get swept away. So they made other arrangements. And apparently that was pretty common. They had other places to stay. Well, these two teenage boys thought they were going to have quite the deal with this teenage girl. They imagined all kinds of things. So, they had found a house to stay in, and they were trying to figure out how to, heat up. They had a wood stove, and they found some food, and, they were going to have this long, cozy evening, right? And then knock, knock, knock. The grandmother of the girl showed up. And those boys were so disappointed. Oh, their plans. But they lost a whole tanker car. There was a tank farm where Jack in the Box is now, and it was completely destroyed. So all of that oozed out into the Santa Ana River. The tanker cars, of course, were bringing in diesel fuel for the smudge pots and all that kind of stuff. That's what tank farm was for. Look at that's a mess. They also had stockyards, so out not to Cajon Pass, but well before that, they had some stockyards where they'd have to take the animals out for a while, a couple of hours, and then they could bring them back on the train. Depends on how far they were going, but that was the plan. Anyways, those were all destroyed. So, and you can see everybody's trying desperately to get everything back in order, but it's a lot of work. And I love, this is my favorite slide. The fray without ceasing, and then you see this big disaster, and then all these WPA guys. And I talked to a lot of people. So most of the people I talked to had been teenagers during the flood, and they actually had very fun memories of the flood. And one of the fun memories is one of their dads worked for the post office. It was a WPA job, and he only had, like, I want to say 5 hours a month that he got to work at the post office. But somehow or other, during the flood, he got stuck at the post office and then lived there for the next 2 weeks because he couldn't go home. He couldn't go back and forth. And he delivered local mail. So for that family, it was a huge, I mean, he got paid for all those hours. It was a huge, big thing. And that's what the kid remembered, was how neat it was that his dad had so much work finally. And a lot of people, I think, were relieved, to tell you the truth, to have some work. There's more hanging track. This is Barstow. So this is the Mojave River. Yeah. And more hanging track. You can't just put a train on that either. Oh, here's a little Pacific Electric train, and then you can see the track. Look at all that stuff that's on it. Whew. A lot of work trying to dig that out. There they are down at 3rd Street trying to dig out. A lot of people were stuck places, and then they tried to drive on the Pacific Electric bridges. They were a little more stout, and so if they could get their car up there, lots of times that's how they got back and forth, was on those Pacific Electric bridges. But my sister's family, my sister's husband's family, owned Meadowbrook Dairy, which was down on South Waterman. It's where the county building is now. Anyways, they had one of those Pacific Electric bridges along the Santa Ana River right there, near there. And it was causing flooding because it had dammed up behind with all the debris. So they just dynamited it up. They blew it up so that they could let the water flow so it wouldn't cause any more flooding. So there was people did take things into their own hands to try to stem the flow. So this is a good example of the gas lines. This is right at Millennium. You can see the electric lines. A lot of people still had wood burning stoves, so that was kind of a good thing. But it was cold. There's a sinkhole that's on Mount Vernon, actually, right where the channel is now. And you can see everybody came into town to look around. Oh, this is out by Cal State along Route 66. I love this picture. Here's an example of the approaches being out on a bridge. You can see the dirt and debris is up as high as the bridge itself. This is 3rd and Tippecanoe. And here's all the destroyed. So let's see. 780 miles of roads were out, over 100 bridges. And everything was washed out. And at Millennium, the orange show was about to open. And Frank Merriman actually came into town when the orange show was going to open. It opened on time. And he bragged to the crowd that this orange show was so new that even the parking lots had 2 feet of new dirt on them. But a lot of people came out, tourists, they want to see you. I do too, I do the same thing. When there's a big rain, I go out and look. All that old equipment, it's just amazing. This is out along Route 66. Camp Cajon, this is in Cajon Pass. This was a camping spot, a rest stop. A lot of things happened there. I think there was a lodge there. Anyways, this is before the flood, of course. And it was Bristol. It belonged to, it was built by Bristol. It was quite the thing. But then the roads all came out, and you'll see some pictures of Camp Cajon in a minute, I think. So here's some railroad lines. You can see some of the approaches are gone. So they're trying to do repair work. They had to move railroad lines from one side of the river to the other on Model Creek. Model Creek and Cajon Creek sort of collect right after it gets through Cajon Pass and sort of merges together, and that's what slammed into San Bernardino. To tell you the truth, the Santa Ana River is pretty much south of San Bernardino. It did cause problems because you saw all the problems that it caused. But, and in Redlands, you guys are up high, you're smarter than we were. You did not build your town right in the middle of a big watershed. That was smart. That bench has served you very well. Oh, here's after the flood. So you can see Camp Cajon is washed away. Camp Cajon is just about where the McDonald's is when you go up the pass. That's about where Camp Cajon was. Those big tables, there's big round tables that had checkerboards in the middle of them. And those went all the way down to, they found them about 7 miles below Colton. They drug them out of the water and they put them in a park in San Bernardino. They're at Paris Hill Park and at Lattle Creek Park. So those tables still exist. Oh, I was going to tell you a funny story about South Colton. So maybe some of you know Dr. Ernie Garcia. He grew up in South Colton. And he was about 7 when the flood happened, but his brother was about 10 or 11. And his brother went out in the backyard. His mom told him to go throw the trash out or something. And his brother fell in their septic tank. Oh. And Ernie had the best memories of that. He was like, ah! He just thought it was great. But a little grocery store near Ernie's house had gotten washed away. And he and his brother would go down to the river and they would, the labels on all the cans had been destroyed, of course, but they would collect the cans in these big bags and they'd bring them back to the house and then they'd shake them and they were just, so sure they were peaches or, some exotic thing. And they were always, rutabagas or spinach or some terrible thing. This is Foothill. You can see the destruction. Foothill. Can't really go on that road very well. That's a wrecking yard. But everybody dug those cars out and got them back up on the road. Can you believe that? And then those cars, and you'll see some pictures of them. Sometimes, not that one. I bet not that one. Sometimes people would let the teenagers dig them out and then they'd say they're theirs as soon as they could get them out. And then the teenagers used them for racing for many, many years. There is a huge racing culture in San Bernardino. Down where the Orange Show is, there was a couple of racetracks down there. And they put those old cars to good use. You can see them digging them out. They dug them out. The wrecking yard, they had to dig all of their cars out. This poor guy, yeah. I mean, I think most of us would just say, oh, that's it. See, here's a couple of teenagers. They've claimed a car. They've found one now. So they're going to dig it out and get it back up on the road. Little tanker cars, they're stuck. There's another one stuck in the mud. Look at those berms of just dirt. And then this is Mojave River again. And there's hardly ever water in the Mojave River. So this was quite the sight. I understand last weekend there was water in the Mojave River. So that's a pretty big deal. Oh, there's those tracks again. This is upland. So you can see where it ran right through a vineyard. Rancho Cucamonga. And this is the Santa Ana River right before you get to Eureka. So you can see that they had some flood control, right? They had built this dike, but a river will just do what a river wants to do. And the river just reestablished its way. Now, here's some ironic things. So before the flood, I told you Orange County was really bugging San Bernardino about establishing a flood control district. By 1938, they had decided, yes, we should probably have a flood control district. So, you know, there's a lot of rigmarole establishing a new district like that because you've got to have taxes. You've really got to convince the people that this is worthwhile. This is something for all of our best interests, et cetera, et cetera. So they're holding these open public meetings to convince people about establishing a flood control district. It got flooded out. So the following year, when it came along again, they voted to have a flood control district. See, this guy is now, he's the opposition is running away because everybody wanted flood control now. So there have been some more floods. 1969, I was in school and I got out for the day from 1969 for flooding. And this is an unusual flood because it happened over like a month period. And it was very much like we're having now. Too much rain, too often. So it wasn't any 12 inches, but it was 5 inches at one point and 7 inches a month later. And, you know, it just causes all kinds of problems. And then this is Harrison Canyon. And there was a school down here. And now they've just taken out all these houses and made it into a big park. A dam burst right up here. It was a little basin. It didn't destroy any houses, but it was not good. Let's just put it that way. And then of course the 2003 Waterman Canyon flood. And that was a pretty bad one because it slammed into a camp, Camp Sophia. And there was a caretaker and his family were staying there. And I think they lost a couple of members of that family in that flood situation. Prado Dam, so it was completed in 1941. All the plans had been drawn up. It was shovel ready, as they say. So once the 1938 flood happened, the president immediately made it into a WPA project and it got going. So it was built in, well, it had already been planned, but it was completed quickly because of funds were released for it. And then the Seven Oaks Dam was also built on the Santa Ana River. It's in the mouth of the river, and we can all praise Louis Fletcher, who convinced the Army Corps to put it in this canyon instead of in the middle of Mentone, because that's where they originally wanted to put it. And he had testified to Congress to get him to move it, but he found a location. A lot of people don't even know it exists. The other thing about the Seven Oaks Dam is it is paid for 100% by Orange County money. And why is that? Because it really impacts their lives. So if you think the flooding was bad in San Bernardino, it was bad, don't get me wrong. But the Disneyland would have been under 4 or 5 feet of water. So, you know, all those very expensive properties. And Orange County has also really, a river meanders, goes back and forth, as you saw in that one that broke out of the channels. Well, Orange County has just moved and developed it to be a channel. And then when a flood happens, there's no place for the water to meander. It used to, you know, yeah, by 50 miles or so meander. But, you know, it's not allowed to meander anymore. So then you have to build this great big channel. And yeah, that makes it very difficult. Anyway, that's what I'm trying to say. So Orange County did build this dam. And I mean, it depends on how you feel about this dam, but they tried to change it after the fact from a flood control dam to impounding some water, which I think if it's managed well, why not? It just needs to be cleaned out and ready for the next flood season is my point. If it fills up our aquifer, I think that's a good thing. More water for all of us. Oops, here's some of the flood control. I don't know what I did, but there's some of the flood control all along the fronts of the river. I mean, all along fronts of the mountains. And this is online, so you can certainly go look this up. But this is the 1862 flood. You can see it's way up here. This is 1938. Or no, maybe, well, I can't see it from here. Oh, 1938 is right here. This is 1991. But look, 1862 is up here. Here's the deal. We can't control the weather. So will we have these kind of rains again? Well, maybe. And here's the other thing. A lot of people, I have had a lot of arguments over the year about this. This did not occur because of melting snow. In fact, there was hardly any snow in the mountains when this flood happened. I have all the dam keepers' reports. We did all the calculations. It just didn't, it wasn't caused by quickly melting snow. That was a brand new concept back in 1938. And so some people attributed it to that, but I worked out all the equations and no. So if we get another storm system or two and they dump 12 inches on us, think of what happens when we get 2 inches. We have flooding, right? Closes down highways, it causes all kinds of problems. And if we got a couple of storms, oh, thank you. If we got a couple of storms with 12 inches, we would be in trouble. This flood did happen after the ground was saturated, just like right now. So if the storm that's going to come on Wednesday came and dumped 12 inches on us, it would cause some problems. So we can do what we can do. And there's no controls on Otter Creek, by the way. There are controls on the Santa Ana River that will help the people in Orange County. But as far as people in Redlands, I mean, you have some channels now. We do have some swift water that will get away from the city a bit, but there's a lot more hard surfaces. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more roads and all that stuff. 12 inches is a lot. It's just caused by too much rain is what I'm trying to say. So, okay, any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which one is flood or 100-year flood?
That designation has gotten outdated.
Can you repeat?
Oh, I'm sorry. He asked which one is a 100-year flood. And that's a designation that's sort of outdated. The truth is that every year you can have a chance of a 100-year flood. So which one of those is a 100-year flood? Well, the biggest one was that 1861 flood. Could we have another one of those? There were no people here either. Think of that. There's 1861. There was probably, I mean, yes, there a few other people. Yeah, the Albemarle, but that's about it. So there weren't hard surfaces, there weren't channels, there weren't, and it caused a lot of problems. But everything that the flood control builds is based off of that flood, that 1862 flood. Yeah. So when they build something, in fact, Prado Dam was not built to stop a 1938 size flood because they couldn't build a dam that high, basically. So they only did it as high as it did, which is why they had eventually put the 7 Oaks in. Doesn't need no. Yes, sir. Uh-huh. Oh, wow. Wow, and so that was January or February? Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. I know what statement I've been talking about. It's state water project. I know where it is. Yes. I'm sorry. What? Yeah. Right. You know, I would have to ask one of the flood control engineers. And I know that they had to do something called the Manning equation, which is extrapolating information out, because I mean, there weren't that many people here. There was no pictures to take. And the way they found they even used the Manning report, I mean, the Manning equation, there were some steps at the Agamatsa Cemetery of a chapel that had been there. And they had eyewitness people that said the water came up to the steps at that chapel. So they knew that the water had come up at least that high. And so then, okay, well, then you stick it. So in other words, that Manning equation is sort of a best guess kind of thing. You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm not interested in that. Yeah. You know, he asked about the history of the sanctuary. He was gone now. The sanctuary, it's very interesting history. It's been used for so many different things, but it has been used for flood control. It has been used for agriculture water. It has been used for drainage. It has been used for clean water, delivery, all kinds of things. I'm impressed that the city of Redlands knows how important it is and has tried to save it. It is the oldest human-made thing in this valley. It's super important. A water ditch. It was built by Native Americans for the Asistencia. It was built by Native Americans using the shoulder bones of cows. So back in those days, the face of the economy was, and we're talking about the 1860s here, or no, 1840s. The base of the economy was hides and tallow. So the San Gabriel mission has moved all the horses and cattle out to this valley because there's always water out here, right? And they had more room and everything else. So they started to sort of establish a satellite. We've been out here, rancho is what they call it. And they hired, well, I don't know if they hired the Native Americans, but they got the Native Americans to build a ditch. And they've been using it every day. It's been in constant use as far as I know. It's a treasure. You should all treasure it. A water ditch. I know that seems like a funny thing, but it really is. Yeah. I don't know. You'd have to ask the city what the plans are, how much it's been disturbed. Does the city have an archaeologist?
It was placed on the ground in 1934. So it goes parallel to Redlands Boulevard. Starts underground at the Buick Agency and then goes all the way through. When you're at the Tartan, you're on top of it. When you're at the old mall, it's just to the north of it, and then it's right out of Eureka Street. And then it becomes no longer the Zaha, it then becomes the Mission Flood Control District ditch, because it used to flow down West State Street, make the curve right at center, and follow down West Citrus, and then turn down New York Street, which didn't exist, and then curve back behind the Redlands City Fax Building, parallel to Brookside Avenue, Brookside, then down through Stater Brothers, and then back down Mission Road, and then finally heading back down to San Mateo Creek and the Santa Ana River.
I think that something. San Bernardino and a clean steer away. As their own thing. Yes. Yeah, that is a really neat story.
Water. What happens during well, I can show you a map, but it goes under the beach. But sometimes it would change its course during a flood situation when it was allowed to meander. But Orange County early on, the farmers really started closing in on it, and it's not allowed to meander as much. So, you know, when you get down below Prado, it's mostly just concrete channels down there. It doesn't even, well, some of it has a soft bottom, but not a lot of it. It's because they've imposed so much development. So it had some sides. It did have some early sides, yes. But I have to say, Orange County basically, most of their flood control is done by the Army Corps of Engineers. Most of it is done by the Army Corps of Engineers. But they run Prado Dam, and they do. They're heavily leaned on by Orange County to do flood control because the property values are so high in Orange County. You just can't really afford to lose Disneyland for a second. What sign? Oh,